the game was different, right? The rules was different. The ball was different.
The Euro style is different in America.
The Euro style was a lot different than America.
That's the first time y'all seen that Euro step too, huh?
Absolutely.
Today on the EuroStepping, we have one of the most important people from a statistical data side of things who I think I finally met in person when I think it was in Manchester, right? Worthing. Dave Owen, thank you for joining the EuroStepping. Tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Everyone should know by now, right?
I know, right?
So, day job, I work full-time for Basketball England. Still absolutely feel blessed to work full-time in basketball. I think it's a rare thing in this country. It's a dream I always had. So I love that I get to wake up every day and influence the sport on a national level. It's awesome. And then obviously most people know me from my kind of Dave Owen basketball platform. So that's primarily a recruitment platform. So my website that provides kind of exposure for all of our best young talent to try and, give them that leg up to hopefully get more opportunities, whether that's at college, in the States or professionally. I just try to shine a light on our best talent and make them as easy to recruit as possible for kind of overseas people. And obviously I'm pretty prevalent on social media, kind of using that website platform and just kind of like shining a light on British basketball, both in terms of recruitment and talent, but I just like to kind of celebrate everything that's good about our sport and everything that's good that's going on. I try to be across everything and just share that positivity, particularly on Twitter, which can be quite a negative space at times. I like to put a bit more positivity out into the world. I love British basketball, I always will, so I think it's good to share anything that kind of makes you feel good about the sport.
That is nice. And yeah, you've been around for a while and kind of, got fingers everywhere, connections, kind of talk with everyone and being involved. So on behalf of, let's say, the coaches, because I'm a British coach, thank you for your work, man, and really appreciate what you do. Kind of like, the origin story. Who is Dave Owen? How did you get started? In your role of Basketball England and providing that service for players.
Yeah, so if you take it right back, I started playing basketball in year 8 at secondary school, just because older kids were playing in the car park. I walked past, it looked cool. I've always been into sport, trying new sports, doing anything different. And I've always said it looked different culturally to football. Football was like aggression. Everyone wanted to fight you if you did anything good and trick them or whatever. These guys always seemed like they were having fun with it, and it was like a lot more welcoming. And like, I was never naturally going to play basketball because I was like one of the smallest kids, right? My whole year I was like probably 5'6" when I left school at 16 and then shot up to 6 foot. But they welcomed me in as like year 11s, welcoming this tiny little year 8 kid, happy to let me kind of have a go. And that was it. I was hooked. I played every day, rain or shine, with the older kids. Then also as I got older, I was playing with the younger kids. So it just became an obsession. And I think I love the fact that I could get better at it on my own. I could just be in my garden. Yeah. If it was raining, I was in my parents' garage dribbling. So whatever the weather was doing, I still had a ball and I was still getting better. And that meant that I got better than everyone else quickly, simply because I played every day. It wasn't talent, it wasn't coaching because I wasn't being coached. I just played every day. So pure kind of repetition put me ahead of everyone else. And obviously, if you're better than everyone else at something, it's kind of fun, isn't it, right? So you're going to play it every day because it's fun winning. So that was kind of where the love started, from just stumbling upon it, playing, giving it a go, falling in love with it. Obviously started getting to the NBA, follow that as a fan. And that was really it. I was a kind of low-level player and an NBA fan up until 2014, when I kind of turned 30 and I decided I want to do some coaching as an experienced player. Kind of driven by the fact that there was no coaching in my town when I was a kid. So I was like, I want to set that up when I get old enough to have some decent knowledge to pass on, which I thought 30 is a reasonable age. So because I was going to be coaching in this country, I was like, well, NBA knowledge is not particularly useful for grassroots coaching in the UK, right? So I just started to kind of research British basketball a little bit and try and get my head around at least what the league structures were. So if any talented players sort of came across my sort of coaching world, I could at least know where to send them and what to do.
Okay, yeah.
So that was my first interaction with British basketball. I probably couldn't have named a team in the BBL or a British player outside of Luol Deng at that point, which is probably a familiar state for a lot of people in the UK, sadly. So yeah, I started looking into British basketball, and I guess being used to the NBA, I was kind of amazed at the lack of information available and how it seemed very kind of unclear, because I could just about figure out the leagues. Okay, the BBL's the pro league, then we've got national leagues. Okay, that's fairly easy. But then as I started to get into it, I was like, well, I wonder who the best British players are. Just interested to know that. You try finding that out from the internet when you don't know anyone in the sport, right? Where are you going for that information? Like, it's not obvious. You can just about find out who plays for the national team. They're trying to figure out like who they are, what they're about, trying to find an interview or anything. Back in those days in 2014, there was just like nothing out there. And let's say this is someone who's used to NBA coverage, so I'm like, why is this sport invisible in this country? And the thing that baffled me was in 2014, you could not watch the BBL unless you physically turned up to an arena and watched a game. There was nothing, there was no like, what's it called, BBL player or whatever it's called at the moment. There's no Sky, obviously, there was no YouTube. You couldn't watch it on the internet at all. And I was like, okay, so I'm a fan that actively wants to watch your league. I live in Shropshire, so I'm not driving an hour and a half to go and watch a game. So can I not watch your league? No, really? It was wild at the time. And I mean, that's a great example of how far British basketball's come though now with the, like, I think the Sky Sports coverage of BBL is excellent.
Oh, sorry, James.
I very rarely miss a Friday game now because I know what time it's on. I know it's very easy to access. I know the coverage is good, which really adds to a sport for me. I don't really want to watch a game with no commentary and nothing to kind of tell me about the players and give me a bit more information. So like, that's a really good example of how far I think the sport's come. I've completely segued there from my
but it's definitely interesting and understanding that, you know, kind of, I don't know why I always think of origin stories of like evil villains, but that's the origin story of, you kind of saw a gap in the market as a fan of British basketball wanting to know more about the sport. Now, I'm kind of similar. At some point, I was really, really good at knowing the NBA stats. When I was a New Jersey Nets fan, and they had Vince Carter and Jefferson.
Kenyon Martin was my guy.
You know what I mean? And then, so I could tell you, hey, this person's leading this stats, this person's leading this stats. Like there was that one year, I think it was like 4 or 5 years, I was pretty like nerdy on the stats. And Sean Marion, to my disgust, was leading the NBA at 3-point field goal percentage. And I was absolutely horrified because he's got the worst shooting form in the, you know, and as a young coach, I'm like, hey, you have to shoot a certain way. And then, you know, kids then can go and look at Sean Marion and go, well, if he shoots like that, you're like, oh my life, you know what I mean? So it's kind of crazy. So no, I understand the, you know, what you're referencing in terms of wanting to know more about the BBL and wanting to be more
information. Like, I'm not really like a highlights guy. I'd rather watch a full game or look at stats, weirdly, because I don't feel like the highlights really tell me what I want to know personally. And I'm a geek. I like data and that. Like, I understand why some people are dismissive of stats, and I will never argue with anyone. Like, it is the eye test. I obviously watch a lot of basketball and have my own subjective opinions. But I think for me, because I have a platform where I speak about players, I don't want that to be my opinion. I want it to be facts, because you can't argue with the facts. When I start talking about people's stats, the stats are the stats, right? You can't argue with them. You can't come at me on Twitter and say you're wrong. I'm like, I'm dealing in facts. All I'm doing is celebrating people's performances and telling you who's doing well statistically. I leave it to everyone else to have their opinions and the subjectivity, because I just don't want to get into that whole, I don't want the hate coming back my way. And also, I'd always, you know, throw in a few subjective opinions there if I really like a player and they've had a great game, or I just like their kind of almost off-court things, their character and who they are, and they're kind of inspirational. Like Miles Hessen, I tweeted about the other day, or technically I just retweeted what Mansour Ahmed said, because I thought he encapsulated what Miles is perfectly in just that warrior mentality, and the fact that every single game he is there for his team and carries it on his back, and you never see his level dip, you never see his kind of will to win dip for a second. And like, those are the kind of players that are just inspirational. So we should absolutely talk about that stuff, which you can only see from watching a game. You don't want to get that from a box score or highlights, because you're seeing it for the entire 40 minutes. So stuff like that is great to talk about, but if we're talking about who's best and this and that, I leave that elsewhere.
I hear you. And the funny thing about those conversations is that you're never wrong and you're never right. Do you know what I mean? It's always subjective, and you can always manipulate stats to kind of bolster or diminish an argument. So
that's an example where I think it's the value of my work and the stats and the data is that if me and you want to sit here and say, okay, let's chat, you can't, it's not a definitive answer, but between us we have a conversation about the best 5 male British players of all time. What I would want to do before we have that chat is use stats to get a list, so a short list, so we can say, okay, well, these are people we can probably agree should be in the conversation, and then we chop it up and talk about it and come up with the 5 from that. And we'll probably not have the same 5, and that's fine because it's fun and it's a conversation. But I'd always want like a starting point. And shorten the conversation, because I think if we started talking about it now, you'd be like, I don't even know where to start. Like, there's some obvious names, but then you're worried about who you're missing. You haven't really done your research, that kind of thing. So I always think stats should be almost the starting point of who we're going to talk about, or as a coach, who you're going to scout and who you're going to get the eye test on for recruitment and all that kind of thing. It's basically an instant shortlist, isn't it? Is the kind of value in stats.
Yeah, I like that, an instant shortlist. So looking at Dave Owen basketball, would you say it's more of a reference site, like basketball reference, or would you say it's like a service? How do you kind of, I know it can be a mix, but also I know college coaches have reached out, national team coaches have reached out. How would you encapsulate it?
I'd say its core purpose is as a recruitment platform. That's the motivation, I guess, behind it, that I want to shine a light on our British talent and I want them to get recruited and get opportunities. Like, even if it changes with one kid's life, that a coach saw them on my website, whereas they wouldn't have seen them if my website didn't exist. That's the purpose right there. That gives me the motivation to do what I do. So it's absolutely a recruitment platform for exposure, because like, obviously highlights float around on social media and they're posted, they're there for a few days and someone might catch them. But having a permanent platform and a reference point is so important, because you need to be able to Google a kid and then, okay, now I see a professional looking profile. It's got the highlights, it's got the stats. You click here to email their coach, so you've got the easy contact. You don't have to go and sort of research and find out who they play for and how to contact them and all that. It's a one-stop shop for recruiting in the UK. And obviously, the easier I make that process, the more opportunities our kids get. So I'm trying to give a coach as much information as I can. And the key thing is, it's information. It's factual information. It's all there for you to then make your judgment. Like, I'm not going to do your whole job for you. I'm not going to tell you who you should recruit. I'm going to tell you who you should look at, and then you do your job. And now I'm going to do your scouting and eye test and see about recruiting them. So it's definitely that. It's the recruitment platform for exposure. But then the other part of it that is also close to my heart is the recognition aspect of it. So yes, we should all be doing social media content and recruitment content on our top talent now and talking about what everyone's doing now. But we shouldn't forget who did maybe better than them 10 years ago. Just because they're not around anymore and they're not playing, we can't really talk about their latest game. It's really, really important to me that we celebrate the great careers of past players. So all of the better players, I'd say most of them on the male side are done. I've still got a lot of work to do on the women's side, because that side of the website is newer. So a lot of the players in the past are not on there yet. That's my bad. I'm one person. It's a free time project. It will happen eventually. But yeah, that's something I think is really important, because I'm really big on wanting our players that should be icons to be icons. I want every young player in this country to know the Joe Leadhams and the Andrea Congreves and the Steve Bucknalls and all these other names, and not just know them, but really understand just how good they were. And because a lot of these players played when there wasn't a lot of video around, that's challenging. because you can look at the numbers, of course, and stuff like that. So the project that I've mentioned a couple of times in the past and I still haven't gone public with, I'm doing a documentary series on some of these players.
Nice.
So everyone keeps telling me they're too long. The first one I've done is an hour 45, and it keeps saying people, it's the attention span these days, you can only do 20 minutes or whatever. I'm like, I feel that's a bit disrespectful to someone's career.
Thank you. Yes.
20-minute or whatever, like hour 45. We're talking about like 20 years potentially of someone's career.
Yeah.
Let's give it its due and talk it through.
No, if you're that interested, you'll watch. Do you know what I mean?
If you're watch it all or you're not. So yeah, I'll clip it up for social media and put the kind of the best bits out there and the the really good kind of catchphrases and bits that come out of it. But if you're into it, you're gonna watch it all. And like the thing that I think as well, like podcasts like Joe Rogan's the #1 podcast in the world, I believe. Someone here's run 3.5 hours. So I listen to those. I listen to them all the time because I like having something to listen to while I work and in the background. And stuff like that. And most people are always trying to look for the next content. When you finish a series on Netflix, you're like, oh man, I've got to find something else to watch now because I've run out. So surely having it longer is good because it keeps you, even if you watch it in 3 parts because you're a busy person, that's fine. It's like watching it in installments, isn't it?
Yeah, and going on transit, everyone's mobile and going places. I would imagine definitely there'd be a lot of video in that documentary, but even
I think the crucial thing, because I was thought, okay, I've got players profiled on there, you can look up the level they played and their stats, but it would be difficult for a young player to look at one player who should be an icon and another player who was like a solid pro, let's say, and understand the difference of the levels maybe from those basic profiles. But when you do a long form documentary series, and I got everyone from around this player's career talking about them, so because if you sit there and speak to the subject of the documentary, they're going to play themselves down and be very kind of modest because that's kind of our culture in the UK. So I needed to get other people to talk about them who were really close and knew the stories and some of the great stuff that happened in their career. The way they talk about it, the way their eyes light up and the reverence which they speak with these people with so much kind of respect and admiration, that as a viewer then makes you think, wow, like this wasn't just a decent pro, this guy had a serious career. And it also touches a lot on, as much as people are comfortable talking about them as a person as well, it's, talk to me about your relationship with them. You've known this person their whole life. You weren't just a teammate. Why are they in your life, a lifelong friend? Why has that bond been what it is? What is it about them as a person that makes you want to keep them in your life and have that bond? And then it kind of ends on what's their legacy? Like, what do they mean to the sport of British basketball? And it's a lovely way to kind of summarize everything you've heard of as it moves through their various career points. And then it kind of really makes you appreciate kind of their standing in that sort of almost Hall of Fame that should exist one day of British basketball.
Side note, we're going to get sidetracked and we're going to have to jump back in a minute. What I heard there was some sort of, have we got that? Is that at the O2, the Hall of Fame?
No, we have a National Basketball Heritage Centre in Worcester.
Okay.
But that's where all the kind of like documents and everything from the history of the sport are there, all the kind of records and who won the league and all that kind of stuff, photos and all that cool stuff. I believe a Hall of Fame, I think there's a group of people linked to the Heritage Centre working on that as far as I know, but I'm not close enough to it to speak definitively on that.
I did hear about that. Let's see if I can squeeze in one more question before we log out and log back in. So you kind of briefly mentioned you're one man, you're not getting paid for it, but obviously the work that you do, everyone tells you how important it is. Have you ever thought about stopping or switching sports?
Yeah, not for a second. No, basketball is my love. It's been since I was 11 years old. And I know so many people in the British basketball community now that like I feel very obligated to keep doing what I'm doing. It's obviously challenging. And to be fair, I'm not a one-man band, I'm a two-man band because I do not have website skills. Like I don't know how to do coding and all that kind of stuff. So I'm extremely fortunate, but my best friend is an excellent web development. So he started out doing it for free, just as a mate. Still extremely grateful for, because that platform would not exist without him. It's my idea, it's my data, it's my vision, but I didn't have the technical ability to do it. I didn't have any funding to pay someone else to do it. So it wouldn't have happened without him. And now obviously we have some money from Patreon, from people who kind of choose to kind of donate and support it, which is vital, because if you're not getting any money from it, it's not about making money, but at the same time, it's essentially what you're doing doesn't have value if it doesn't have any money coming in. So it's not about the amount I get, because it's not my income, but it kind of tells you you're wasting your time if it's not of value to anyone, if that makes sense. Whatever money comes in, I just split 50-50 with him, because he does as much work as I do in terms of making the platform viable. Obviously, the goal is to make it sustainable long term. I think we worked out we both probably put in about 20 hours a week on it at a time, minimum 10 hours a week. So it's kind of a lot. It's like a part-time job effectively. And we're currently kind of divvying up about £200 a month off Patreon. So if you want to work at that hourly rate, I don't want to work it out, because I don't think I want to know.
Don't do it to yourself. But no, and I guess I have the same kind of conversation with myself. Similar, two-man band. I've got my editor who, these episodes, especially when I record them at the start of a season or at the end of a season when I'm, getting through it, there's a lot of editing to do. And the graphics, I think the graphics is probably the biggest thing that I don't have the knowledge for. So, I pay.
I mentioned, that took so long to do. I'm not that keen to do another one because it's so much work. It's so slow as well. It's a slow grind.
So for me, it's always, but even talking to you before we really got going, and it being beneficial for someone like yourself, I think that for me is great. I've had parents reach out and say, they appreciate, the platform, and it's opened their eyes to so many things, even understanding the different levels between junior college, NAIA, and D3, 2, 1, whatever. I think that's been really good and positive. The fact that I've been around a while, and knowing the players and parents that want to get their kids to these levels, I think that's made the biggest jump.
But I think, as you just touched on there, when you get a message from someone kind of recognizing or appreciating what you're doing, that has so much value, and it almost buys another month of you doing what you do. And it's something I really encourage anyone listening to this, anyone involved in British basketball. Literally, you just sending a message to someone like Sam Nita, or someone who does so much for the game, just saying, I see what you're doing, I appreciate it. That's all you need to do to give someone that just little bit of boost to keep going. Because it's a grind for all these people out there kind of setting up their Patreons and trying to find a way to make what they do sustainable, and balancing the time of doing it versus actually making a living and paying their bills. We're all in the same boat because of the resources in British basketball. And I think if you can't afford to support someone via Patreon, sending a message can be almost just as valuable, just to buy their time for a little bit longer and give them that little motivation. Because it can often feel like you're putting all this stuff out and you're constantly grinding and going. I'm doing a weekly update on the stats on the website every week. And you feel like you're kind of almost doing it in isolation. You don't necessarily see the impact of what you're doing because it's not really visual. Like, you can see your likes or your retweets or whatever on social media, but that's not overly rewarding, is it? I don't think, for most people. And most people probably don't even have time to look at that kind of stuff. I don't really. I think just encourage anyone out there who appreciates what someone does, just take that 30 seconds to send them a quick message, letting them know that, because it can go a long way and keep some of these amazing people we've got in the sport, doing what they're doing a little bit longer, maybe.
That's I think that's such a great point. Just the appreciation, and it's hard, right? You might have spent X amount of money to get the latest episode or update or put on an event, and then you're like, man, why am I doing this? It's silly o'clock in the morning, and you're like, man, this might be it. And then somebody goes, hey man, really enjoyed the last blah blah blah, or really appreciate it, or a coach reaches out and says, hey, I'm looking at this player, what do you think? And then you're like, man, like, I'm making a difference. I'm making a a change at some sort of level. And yeah, it does kind of put a battery in your back to keep going. You know, that much longer.
Fantastic way of putting a battery on your back to keep going. That's amazing because it gives you energy, right? It gives you that lift. Like the one that's always stuck with me is Caleb Fuller.
Yeah, I saw that letter that he wrote, and
sent me a message that he gave me permission to put on my Patreon as an example, and that meant the absolute world to me. And he's a very kind of eloquent kid who had the kind of forethought to be thankful and reach out to people who helped him on the way. I think it's so important to do that because you're just blind to it a lot of the time. You know, I don't know. You know, I see kids getting recruited. I have no idea if their coach has seen them on my website or it's gone through the normal kind of club network or whatever. I have no idea. So for someone to tell me that my website's made a difference on that level, you know, an NCAA Division 1 scholarship, you know, it's life-changing stuff. And to know you played a part in that is, you know, it's the reason why I do all this.
No, that's good. Right. So from your work and especially what we've just been talking about regarding, you know, being recognized and the accolades, and I guess even a patron to some extent must make you feel good that someone's willing to pay for your work. Do you feel that you've made a change? Do you feel like you've made a big impact on the sport?
It's difficult to say yes without sounding arrogant, isn't it? I like to think so, but again, it's not measurable. You know, I'm a data stats guy, right? So I need someone seeing the impact. You know, if I could somehow know every player where their recruitment has had my website as a part in that, like that would be amazing to know. Except if it's one, then I don't want to know. They say I don't know what the impact is. Obviously, some people reach out and send me messages. Obviously, I can see what kind of traffic comes in from the States and stuff like that. But yeah, it's very difficult. I think the only indication is when I speak to people, sometimes people who I wasn't even, like I didn't have a connection with, I didn't know they knew what I did or anything like that. And they speak, you know, very kind of glowingly and very appreciative of what I do. Like that tells me something. But obviously that is a kind of random every now and again. Like I think because I live in Shropshire, I'm very kind of away from the basketball world. You know, I don't coach at a club or anything, so I'm not kind of around people in the game. I maybe don't have those kind of casual interactions. Like if I bumped into you, you might tell me you love what I do. I don't know. I think for people to do that kind of digitally is maybe not as natural as if you were kind of around the culture more. You know, if I lived in London, I was always around events and games and leagues and stuff like that. You'd maybe feel it a bit more. I guess I'm quite isolated where I live and in terms of not being involved in club basketball, maybe.
But I think that's good. I think, you know, just like at the start, when we were speaking, the fact that you're isolated gives you the freedom, if you will, and the ambiguity to kind of mix in and fall out as much as you want. You know, there's no real allegiance to one set of people. You're just seeing individuals and programs as individuals and programs rather than, all right, well, you know, he's over here, I'm with, you know, this group over here, so I'm not really messing with that, or I'm just gonna focus on these sets of people. It's, hey, I don't really care, I'm everywhere.
I think, you know, with the nature of what I do, with stats being objective and, you know, factual rather than my opinion, and because I cover the entire breadth of the game, I think it's very, very important that I'm impartial and don't have favorites, and, you know, I'm not pushing this kid's recruitment over someone else.
Yeah.
It's like, with the numbers, I will put everyone out there who's putting up numbers. And listen, if you post your highlight tape on Twitter, whether you're on my radar or not, in terms of stats, if I see it, I'll share it. I'll share anyone's highlights. I don't care. I'll always share any highlights I see, because it might give a kid a chance. And if he's not on my radar, hey, maybe he should be. So like anything like that, I always say with kids, tag me in your tweet, make me aware of it. I will retweet anyone's highlights. I don't mind. Whether you're on my website or not, you know, there is a kind of threshold with stats and stuff like that in terms of talent recognition, because obviously I can't create a profile for every kid in the country. It'd be very nice to, but no one has the time for that. So yeah, so I think it's crucial for me to always be fair, because a lot of what I do, it is that the passion of my recruitment platform comes from, I want everyone to get a fair shot at those life-changing opportunities, or NCAA scholarship or whatever it is. And stats are a nice way to do that, because you are just presenting facts and you're saying, well, this kid's got these stats, this kid's got these stats, this guy might have a bit more hype around him and be at the right program or whatever, have a lot of people talking about him, but actually this guy who's got pretty similar numbers and has kind of proved himself in the same way performance-wise objectively, maybe we should be talking about him a little bit more. And I think that's something that I think I've always been quite passionate about on my platform, that it creates that kind of fairness. And because I don't have any affiliation with any club or program or people, it is just very objective and fair.
Yeah. Okay, right. So into, I guess, the big questions and how it pertains to our EuroStepping population. Since you've been doing the data, is there any trends that you can see between domestic and international? So let's say somebody at Loughborough D1 versus a kid who's at a college program. Is there like similar outputs, or what's the difference?
I think it's not necessarily a statistical thing, but when you think about the kids that tend to go to the States, there's not, if you think about, I guess, think about the ratio of them that are say 6'6" plus versus the ones that are under 6'6", it's way scaled to 6'6" plus. So when comparing stats and stuff, it's kind of difficult because you're also a lot more recruitable if you've got higher. I'd probably go as far as say 6'8" plus is probably the kind of line where you're much more recruitable. And I think some kids maybe struggle with that a little bit. They might see a 6'8" player in this country who's getting a lot of recruitment interest and be like, I'm a better basketball player than him. But yeah, but your market's not the same, because there's 500 American guards who can do very similar to what you can do. There's not 500 6'8" people in that state or whatever, there's not that many people on the planet in relativity terms, in terms of talking like a 6'2" guard. And I think that might be difficult for some younger players to understand, that it's not the same market. You're not being recruited in the same way that kid is. So I think you definitely see that in the stats if you're an efficient big. And then also you've got stuff like athleticism, physical attributes that make you recruitable that would never show up in the stats. So when I'm looking at stats for a league, I have no idea if someone's jumping out of the gym every game and getting highlight dunks, and that or wrong is going to get people's attention. And let's not talk about highlight dunks, but obviously athleticism.
It's true.
Game, you can talk about it on the defensive end if you want to talk more from a coaching perspective and their potential as a defender, if they've got athletic gifts and stuff like that. So there's obviously a lot that you can't see in the stats, where if you were literally looking at the stats, you say, well, why on earth is that kid recruited over this kid? And it's like, well, you have to know that kind of context of, how big are they, how athletic are they? And then obviously there's the academic side as well, which I don't have any awareness of. I wouldn't have any need to look at someone's academic situation. That should be quite private. I don't think I should be putting stuff like that on Twitter about what their GPA is or whatever. I don't think that's really my platform's role to do that. But again, that's obviously a big factor in how recruitable you are to an academic institution, what your grades are. And then there's obviously all the character stuff as well. What impression are you giving that coach when he's on the phone to you? Are you going to be coachable? Are you going to be a leader? Are you going to be the best teammate on the program? All that kind of stuff.
No, I think those are big variables that I think not everyone understands, especially if you've got a 6'3" guard who's really good and wanting to make the leap or wanting to make the jump versus a 6'9" counterpart. Do you know what I mean? There's a big difference, and I think the stats is one thing, and we kind of talked about earlier, stats being one thing and the eye test being another thing. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes they don't always marry.
Sorry to interrupt. I think the other crucial one is actual potential, like their ceiling.
Yes.
Sometimes you'll get a player who's performing at this level, but a coach's opinion may be that he doesn't have that much further to go in terms of his growth and his ceiling. And then you'll get a player that's not performing at the same level as him, but they can see his ceiling is up here and exceeds this player. So he's got the potential in 2-3 years' time to actually way outperform that player. And again, that would be something that's very, very difficult to understand as a young player. You're like, I'm killing this guy right now. I'm way better than him. To understand that he has potential to go a lot higher in the game And obviously, if you're talking like a 4-year college program, that's probably very attractive because you're probably not going to play anyway much in freshman, sophomore year. So if you've got this kid who's got a way higher ceiling, and you know as a senior he's going to win you some games and either get you a raise or keep your job or whatever they're thinking about in that coaching world, right? It's factors.
Yeah, it's an investment. I think a lot of the kids that have been on the show previous have mentioned it, but I don't think a lot of kids going into it understand that it's a business. There's a business side of it. And a college potentially wanting to have you for 4 years, or a junior college wanting to have you for 2 years, it's a financial investment. Do you know what I mean? They're investing their money in you becoming a certain type of player to help the program achieve, whether that's being able to, as a junior college, being able to say, hey, we're going to spend $100,000 on this kid, flights, kit, whatever, classes. We're going to spend X amount on this kid for him to be able to move on to another program to make us look better, to get another recruit in. Like that's understood from the coach's point of view. So, it's not just, hey, we like this kid, he's got a great personality, he can hit a 3 occasionally. It's like, no, we want to be able to develop and push him to send him to a program. So it makes us look better, and then we can get another kid in to then, be successful, win a championship, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, there's a lot that goes to it.
British kids have got to understand as well that it's a big risk for a US coach to recruit you over a US recruit, because they can go and watch that US recruit like every week. They can go and meet the family. They can go do the whole thing in person.
Yeah.
They like to recruit an overseas player. That's a different situation. Or they can come over here and watch them, but it's a different thing than driving around the States, flying over here and trying to see as many kids as you can in probably one isolated game. And then I would assume that the actual process of getting them over and the admin and potential fees and all that side of thing, I don't know too much about it, but I'm assuming that is a bigger investment than recruiting a domestic.
Yes, it's a lot more money. As somebody who studied here in America, international fees is a lot more than a domestic. I know when you are being recruited, a good portion of recruits fit a certain demographic, so they're allowed to apply for financial aid, which then takes money off of, like, you're cheaper to a program. If they want an international, you're not able to apply for certain funding or financial aid, and you cost more than a domestic. So now you're kind of double, triple the investment, if you will. So it's tough, and they need to understand or take that into consideration.
I think it must be. So I'm a very empathetic person, so I try to understand someone's point of view and what it's like to walk in their shoes before maybe like making a judgment on what they do. So like you could easily say, if a coach kind of treats a kid wrongly, if he pulls their scholarship or they lie to them in recruitment or whatever they do that you feel like that's not right, you could easily criticize them. But then if I'm thinking about it, if I'm in that role, I've got a choice between doing what's maybe morally right for this player or keeping my job and having the salary that feeds my family. And when you put it in those terms, we're going to feed our kids over the right moral decision. Right? It's those kind of decisions. I wouldn't want that job. That's tough.
It's tough, and cool. You understand, especially when you're in this field for a while. You understand certain things work out, certain things don't. Not every kid you recruit is going to come in, produce, have great minutes. Not every kid's going to stay healthy throughout the duration. So there is a risk factor. Obviously, you want the bet. You're trying to bat 100, but you're never going to bat 100, right? So,
and that risk factor as well, we're talking about with recruiting UK kids. It might be the first time they've ever left the UK, been away from their family. You have no idea how they're going to adjust to that, right? So, that human factor again in the recruitment.
Yeah, and that's, you go back to any one of the season 1 episodes, and even in this season, kids will act different you know, when they're away from their support networks, whether it being positively or negatively, you know, they change as individuals trying to cope with the change that's going on. So yeah, it's a big adjustment. It's a big risk. Definitely.
Kind of looking at players' experiences as well from the outside, the kind of on court doesn't always parallel with the off court. So you might see someone put up great numbers, everyone's talking about them, they're really successful, but they might be really, really unhappy off the court, and with the lifestyle, being away from the family, they might hate it, but still be performing because they just have that mentality to still perform. And then on the flip side, you might look at someone's numbers and be like, oh, like they're terrible, like that's not a good situation for them. But actually, they're in Miami, they've got a 4-year scholarship, they're getting a great education, they've made amazing friends, they love everything about the lifestyle out there, and they're planning a career outside of basketball, and they're way happier than this guy who, from a basketball perspective, appears more successful, which you'd assume would make them more happy. But you know, it's there's a lot, isn't it? There's a lot in that experience off the court, right, that influences it.
And there's a lot as well that the individuals go out there for basketball and they end up pivoting and finding something else. You know, hey, I enjoy this more, or do you know what? The realization of, you know, me and you spoke off mic, I guess, about your ability of playing basketball, and you was great in school. And then when you know, broaden your horizons a little bit, you went, I'm not really that great. A lot of these kids are good to great or great to good, if you want to go down, where they're from, and then they come over to the States and they meet people that eat, sleep, breathe, that's their every fiber. And then they go, actually, I just kind of like the sport. You know, I'm not as great as I thought. I want to pivot and go in a different direction. So, which I have no problem with. And that's, you know, the joy of this platform is to, hey, I'm just trying to give you the information for you guys to kind of make that decision yourself. I think going to the States is a great opportunity, period. And if you've got the opportunity to go and experience it, then do it.
I think I've always had this thing, like, as I say, from my own experience of thinking I was a really good player at school, but I just wasn't playing against anyone who was a legitimate player. So I say that if you've never played against anyone who's better than you, you're either the best player in the country or you need to play at a different level.
Yes, definitely.
Because if you've never come up against anyone better than you, like, you're not playing at the level you should, or you are literally the number one kid in the country, right?
Literally. But you got to broaden that horizon.
To be fair, even with that, if you're the number one junior in the country, you should be playing against senior players that should absolutely be better than you. So there's always a level you can go to, even within the UK, where you can play against someone that's going to challenge you and kind of find out, well, you know, where you really are at in terms of your level.
I think so too. Is there any relation between good statistics domestically that turn out to have good statistical output internationally? And it doesn't just have to be America. Is there any one that you've seen that you can project or that has stayed consistent?
I'd say the most translatable is probably blocks. If you're a shot blocker, you're a shot blocker at every, whether that's GB under 16s, junior league, senior leagues here, then you go to college. That's the one that seems to translate through to those levels, even if you're playing limited minutes. So like the one that jumps to mind immediately is Kingsley Okoro. Like, he'd had stupid block numbers at every level, and even when he went to a high major and was maybe only playing 15-20 minutes, he was still getting maybe like 2 blocks in those 15 minutes. Whether that was just a case of they understand very specifically that that's their role and that's their ability, and it's, I guess if you're a shot blocker, you're not reliant on the coach giving you a role that allows you to do that. You're probably just going to do that, right? Because you're not going to be kind of, you know, handcuffed or whatever people call it these days by the coach that's going to stop you doing that thing that you're good at with shot blocking. I think you're always going to have the freedom to do that if you're good at it. Whereas maybe if you're a 3-point shooter or you're a scorer and you're not in the situation where the coach wants you to do that, you're not going to hit those numbers that you're maybe hitting, you know, at a different level.
Ooh.
3-point shooting is an interesting one, but it does translate. But as a lifelong sniper myself, I think it's so mental, isn't it? You know, even the highest level really good shooters have up years and down years, and it can really get in your head. It's not necessarily down to kind of role or actual ability. I think a lot of that is mental, but you'll generally see 3-point shooters will kind of translate across levels, I'd say.
Okay. Blocks and threes. That's free throws doesn't translate.
I guess the percentage does, but obviously the volume.
Oh yeah, the attempts and stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Really vary. If you're stuck in a 3-and-D role and you're not really going to be getting to the line too much, then shooter, but your coach just is not going to give you the opportunity to take more than like one every few games or whatever. So yeah, the percentage would be solid, but whether you'd ever get the volume you need depending on different roles, maybe not.
Yeah.
I think maybe offensive rebounding is another similar one that you're probably not going to be limited by your coach that much. And again, you can do it in limited minutes, similar to blocks. So that's probably another one.
Okay. Are there any indicators of players that you think should go overseas? You know, is there any from the stats, the data that you collect, you think, you know what, this kid would be great to go and play at Duke or Kentucky or play for Barcelona?
Mm-hmm. We kind of spoke off mic about my kind of projecting players based kind of thing that's kind of in development, a little bit hush-hush at the moment. But that kind of looks at, so I focus on, let's say we've got a 17-year-old here and he's putting up these numbers. My system would project what level he could eventually perform at. And when I say perform, I mean proving themselves at that level. So getting kind of like 10 efficiency on a 500 team, for example, as a kind of proven player at that level. So the journey that player takes to get to that level, whether it's staying in the UK, going to Europe, going to America, whatever it is, that doesn't really matter to me. So I wouldn't project that next step, because to say someone, oh, they're an NCAA Division 1 player, well, maybe they're going to go to Europe at 14, like a Kareem Creeley or whatever. So it's like, it doesn't, I don't really want a rating system that tells them where they're going to go at the college level, because that might not be the best route for them personally. And I don't know if you touched on this with the EuroStepping, but a clearly very switched on kid that I spoke to about what his plans were. He was saying that if you go to the States at 18, you have your 4 years, you get your scholarship, cool. But when you come out as a British player, you're now competing for jobs with Americans. Because of Brexit, you're no longer an EU player, so you're an import. So you're competing with Americans for work as a professional. If you go to Europe young, like Michael Bell and some of these kids now, if you're in certain countries for 4 years before the age of whatever, I don't know too much about it, you will get citizenship in that country. Now you're competing with EU players, or you can stay in France or Germany or whatever. So this was what I hadn't really thought about it, but this was obviously a very smart kid who had spoken to the right people. And I was like, damn, yeah, that's actually, the American route is what we're used to. That's kind of what kids aspire to. I think it's reasonable because it's what people have done in the past. But it's very, very different now with Brexit, because if you're competing with an American for a job, you could be pretty damn good. It's a very, very different market in terms of volume and talent and everything else than if you're competing with EU spots. So it's an interesting thing to consider for the future, I think, when making those decisions.
I think that's, I didn't have thought about that. The fact of, Brexit's come in and changed things now. So yeah, you're an import. That's crazy. That's whoever that young man is, hat tip to them, man. That's great thinking.
Hopefully that encourages more homegrown recruitment in the BBL, if kind of there's less opportunities in Europe because you're treated as effectively an American import. Hopefully we get, and that's definitely been a change in the last few years. I think, from as far as I can see in the BBL, with the high level talent that's coming in, obviously with the London Lions, they've essentially recruited the GB national team. So still waiting to see Miles Hessen in the BBL, but hopefully that will come one day. So yeah, maybe that will be a factor that there's kind of, you'd love to see it, that our league recognises that and understands we need to give more pro opportunities to our homegrown players. Obviously, I'm always biased towards homegrown.
Homegrown hype.
I need to see those opportunities, and those are players I want to watch in our own domestic league. I understand, import sell tickets, and raise the level of the league and all that. Yeah, I fully understand that, but I'll always back our players and want to see them, because at the end of the day, I want to watch them as a fan, and I can't watch them in the second division in France. I don't know if you have that access with your contacts, but I don't have that.
Yeah, you'd be forever buying league passes. It's crazy. Last few before I let you go, and this has been great, by the way, Dave, so I appreciate your time. What are your views on individuals who have great stats, then go overseas and then have bad seasons? Their output, from your point of view, what does that signify to you?
I guess it's two different answers depending on who we're talking about. If we're talking about a kid who's going to effectively be reliant on other people to advise them in that choice and that decision, or if we're talking, a senior professional who is kind of on you, obviously, as an adult. So are we talking about more kind of junior players and whether they go to the States or Europe? Yeah,
kind of like, let's say post 18 and, let's say they did really good. And it kind of leads on from the last question. But they go over and they don't really have a great, and when I say a bad statistical numbers, I mean within their role that they play, right? Because they can't control the minutes that they play. But
so I guess you as an individual have to kind of try and define why. So is it on you? Should you be taking ownership of your failure to perform? Whether that's mentally, or you don't have the ambition or the drive to play at the level you chose to play at. You've got to take ownership of that, even as a younger player. I think, were you misinformed? Did you go into a situation with bad information and it wasn't the right situation? Was it not sold correctly? That's on someone else. To a point, you still got to do your research and make your own decisions. So again, there's some ownership even in that scenario, but obviously with a younger player, you'd hope they're getting good advice and having the right people around them. And then I guess to try and avoid that as much as possible, again, taking ownership and doing your research. I think, segueing slightly, but I think the hardest thing I can imagine is being a parent who knows nothing about basketball and having a talented young child, because they're looking to you as their parent to advise them and you don't know anything. That must be a horrible, horrible position to be in. And obviously a lot of parents are in the basketball community and they're connected, and it's fine if, obviously like a Cameron Hildress who's got Dan as his dad, who knows the game inside out, has been there and done it. But obviously there's a lot of parents who are just like, yeah, my kid plays basketball. And then they start to be told that, this is a talented kid, he can do this and he can do X, Y, and Z. And they're like, they don't know the world. They don't know that basketball world and how it works and how to advise their child. So that must be really, really difficult. And obviously, even from a club perspective, obviously a lot of kids can come through a club that's not used to that kind of elite talent kind of pathway and helping kids get to that next level. So again, that would be a difficult position as a club, where the parents probably then coming to you and saying, I don't know, do you? And they're like, not really. We've not really had this kind of level of player before, and stuff like that. So I guess that's just what we have to come together as a community and make sure that it's not reliant on who you know and what your network is. Everyone should be available to everyone and should be put in the hands of and saying, yeah, I'm an expert on how the logistics of getting recruited to the States, so the clearing house and the SATs and the actual administrative process. Come to me for that. I'm the expert for that. If you're talking about picking the right conference for your style of play and what would suit you, okay, I know about that. Anyone can call me up and ask me about that. Because at the moment, I feel like it's who you know. And if you're connected to the right people and you can be advised to go and speak to him. But I'd love to see more of and maybe it's something basketball could kind of orchestrate and knit together. But just a kind of national network, and rather than, it can't be one person who's like, he's the guy to go to for everything to do with the States. It has to be broken down a little bit more to reduce that workload on that one individual, and everyone can kind of take ownership of one aspect of that kind of route and pathway and say, and then that allows that person to dig deeper down and make themselves even more knowledgeable and insightful on it. And obviously like, one person can't do that for 100 kids every season. It would be ridiculous, because again, we're into the doing that voluntarily in your own free time basketball. But it certainly feels like something that we could achieve as a community that makes a hell of a lot of sense, to just share knowledge in a kind of, you know, very Dave Owen basketball logic of putting people into a category and everything like that. But yeah, I think there's probably a lot of people out there that are very knowledgeable, and they get God knows how many messages of people trying to pull that knowledge and understand. They probably don't have the time to get back to everyone, maybe. So if you break it down a little bit more, and people are willing to kind of put their hand up and say, yeah, I'm absolutely happy. And then you can also obviously always just speak to players who have been there and done it. So if you are getting recruited by a Division 1 school in a certain conference, it wouldn't be that difficult to find out British players that have played in that conference in recent years, and just reach out to them and say, what can you tell me? What's the situation? And you can even go outside. I did this once for a player. I think he had a professional offer in some random league, say the top league in Switzerland or something like that. And he was asking me, you know, what's that league like? What's the level like? I don't know. I'm not played in Switzerland. But let me go on Eurobasket and find an American who will speak English, who played for the team last year. He's probably on social media somewhere. I might be able to DM him. And I messaged a random American that I didn't know and said, look, I've got a young player who's got an offer in Switzerland next year. You played for the team. Would you mind just reaching out to him and telling him a little bit about the league, what it'd be like to play there as a first year pro, rah, rah, rah. And he was like, absolutely no problem at all. Like, give me his number. And I was like, it's so simple to do. But people maybe don't think like that, or they think, well, I can't just reach out to a stranger and ask them. But it's all basketball. Even if you don't know people in basketball, either not from your country, we all love the same thing. And generally speaking, most people, and people like sharing knowledge. You know, when you ask stuff, you want something from someone, you know, in terms of, I want some money from you, or I want a favor from you, or whatever, that's a little bit different. But people tend to like sharing knowledge because it makes them feel knowledgeable and clever or whatever. So it's usually quite a positive exchange because you're not asking them for a favor, you're just asking them to share what they know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Last question for you, sir. What is your vision for Dave Owen basketball? Where do you see it going, and what's next?
Okay, so the ultimate vision is the current Dave Owen basketball recruitment platform will remain as is, as a not-for-profit platform. The kind of rating system that I have in development at the moment has kind of commercial viability as a product to sell kind of globally outside of the UK. So the dream vision would be that the product brings in enough money to essentially sponsor the recruitment platform and make that sustainable. So we're not scrabbling around for Patreon money and everything like that. And then obviously run itself as an actual business with the products. So that will sort of knit those two things together. And obviously if I'm selling the rating, sort of the performance rating algorithm to other countries, I can also say, oh, hey, if you want that, by the way, I've got a website, kind of code and infrastructure. If you want to use a recruitment platform, once you've identified your talent and if you want to put it on a platform, hey, I can give you that too, as kind of a package, because the two things obviously knit together. One is kind of identifying talent, I guess, and rating it and understanding levels. And the next one is, once you know who your talent is, well, you have to put them on a platform, put them in the shop window, if you like. So those two things kind of dovetail to go outside of the UK and be sold as a kind of concept and product to other countries. So that, to me, theoretically has a lot of potential to really take off as an actual business that, you know, could be sustainable and make enough money to really do something with it. I'm not commercially minded whatsoever. I've always just done everything in basketball out of passion. So I need a lot of advice from people to make that a reality. But if it did go huge and start to go global and bring in serious money, the dream for me would, like, I just want what I do to be sustainable, one, but it would be amazing to get to the point where I can reach out to people in basketball and give them full-time basketball jobs to be a part of this business venture. Like, that would be incredible. And then the next level would be, okay, let's say the business is bringing in enough more money than it needs to pay me and be sustainable, whatever. We've got excess income. We say, okay, Now we're reaching out to NAIA, Hoopsfix, and every other platform and outlet that does so much good on so little resource in British basketball, and saying, what can we do to help? Can we sponsor you? Can we do something to help you now become sustainable? And then maybe they reach a level where they can do the same down again. All of a sudden, the ecosystem of British basketball looks completely different, because we, as British basketball, have created a product that can be sold to other basketball countries and bring in outside money to then filter all the way down. Like, that's the dream. I have no idea if this product I'm working on has the potential to do that, but that would be my legacy for British basketball. I can't imagine being happier than doing something like that.
Well, fingers crossed for you, sir. I am definitely rooting for you. Again, I want to say thank you for all that you've done and doing for coaches, for players, for parents, for international coaches that are recruiting and that don't get an opportunity to know these players, and they use you as a way of learning and understanding more about the kids that we have in our system. I think it's invaluable. Even though you have a patron, I don't think you can put a price on it, especially being a one-man / two-man band and giving up your own time to do it. So thank you so much for your time and for hanging out with us here at the EuroStepping.
Yeah, anytime, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. My recruitment platform is daveowenbasketball.co.uk. So if you're not aware of it yet, please check it out. It shows all our current talent, all of our retiring talent. Just immerse yourself in the history of British basketball and the great players that we produced. And if you like that and what I do on social media, please jump on Patreon / daveowenbasketball and donate wherever you can, just to keep it going and try and make it sustainable.
I appreciate it, my man. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for watching the EuroStepping.
Appreciate you watching the EuroStepping.
I want to thank everybody for watching EuroStepping.
Watching the EuroStepping.
The EuroStepping.
The EuroStepping.
You've been watching the EuroStepping.
The EuroStepping.
EuroStepping.
You've been watching the EuroStepping, a great podcast show hosted by Coach D.